Modern medicine, likes to tell a clean story about progress. The narrative suggests that earlier healing traditions disappeared because they were ineffective, unscientific, or simply replaced by something demonstrably better. But historical evidence, it rarely supports such neat transitions. Some treatments vanish not because they fail, but because the systems that once supported them disappear. One of medieval Europe's most trusted remedies for fractures and structural injury followed exactly that path. It was cultivated deliberately, prescribed routinely, and used in both civilian and battlefield recovery. Yet it gradually slipped out of formal medicine, not after being disproven, but after medicine itself reorganized around different priorities. Today we are examining the bone-healing plant medieval monasteries preserved for centuries, and why its disappearance reveals how medical authority is constructed, not just discovered. If you value careful historical analysis like this, subscribe to the Survival Record, where overlooked survival knowledge and forgotten medical traditions are examined in their real historical context. The plant medieval surgeons relied on was part of ordinary clinical treatment, not superstition. The plant in question is comfrey, Symphytum officinale, widely known in medieval Europe as knitbone. The name reflected observed results rather than symbolic belief. Physicians and herbalists applied crushed roots or leaves to fractures, sprains, and blunt trauma because they consistently saw accelerated recovery of damaged tissue. Modern chemistry has since identified allantoin in comfrey, a compound that promotes cell proliferation and tissue repair. Medieval practitioners didn't understand molecular mechanisms, but they recognized patterns of healing. Their conclusions were grounded in repeated observation over generations of use. Comfrey appears across European medical manuscripts from the early Middle Ages onward. It was not confined to folk tradition or informal healing circles. Formal medical education also acknowledged it. The University of Salerno, one of Europe's earliest and most influential medical teaching centers, transmitted herbal knowledge alongside classical Greco-Roman medical theory. Treatments were evaluated according to observed effects on recovery, especially in injuries involving swelling, structural damage, and limited mobility. Medieval medicine is often described as theoretical or symbolic, but injury care was intensely practical. Bone healing was measurable. Either the patient regained strength and movement, or they did not. Treatments that consistently improved recovery persisted in clinical use. Comfrey remained present in medical writing for centuries precisely because practitioners observed reliable outcomes. The preservation and refinement of comfrey's use depended heavily on monastic communities. The Benedictine order established monasteries throughout Europe that served not only religious functions but also medical ones. Monasteries treated pilgrims, laborers, and the injured, often acting as regional centers of healthcare long before formal hospitals existed. Monastic herb gardens were not symbolic landscapes. They were working pharmacological spaces. Plants were cultivated deliberately, harvested systematically, and processed according to recorded preparation methods. Monks copied medical manuscripts, translated classical texts, and added their own observations based on daily treatment experience. The Abbey of Monte Cassino is a well-known example of such intellectual and medical preservation. Its scriptoria transmitted ancient medical writings while its infirmaries applied practical treatments drawn from both inherited and observed knowledge. Bone injuries were common among agricultural populations and travelers. Repeated exposure to similar injuries allowed monastic healers to observe patterns across many cases over time. Treatments that reduced swelling, stabilized damaged tissue, or restored mobility more quickly were noted and retained. This created a feedback loop of observation and refinement. Comfrey survived within this system not because of philosophical doctrine, but because it performed consistently enough to justify continued cultivation across generations. To understand why a plant that promoted tissue repair held such importance, we need to consider the physical environment in which injuries occurred. Medieval life place continuous strain on the human body. Agricultural labor, long travel on foot, heavy equipment, and unstable working conditions produced frequent trauma. On campaign, soldiers faced additional hazards, blunt force impacts, falls from horses, collapsing fortifications, and crushing injuries during close combat. Even when fractures were not fatal, prolonged immobility could be devastating. A wounded individual unable to regain function quickly became dependent on others for survival. Medical priorities therefore centered on restoring usable strength as rapidly as possible. Perfect anatomical alignment, honestly, mattered less than functional recovery. Treatments that reduced inflammation, promoted tissue repair, and shortened incapacitation directly affected survival. Comfrey was applied alongside splinting, compression, and rest. Its value lay in complementing mechanical stabilization by accelerating biological repair. In a world where mobility determined livelihood and military effectiveness, even modest improvements in healing speed carried enormous practical significance. This context helps explain why medieval practitioners valued empirical outcomes over theoretical explanation. If a preparation consistently supported recovery, it remained part of the medical toolkit. The intellectual legitimacy of Comfrey was reinforced by scholars who documented its effects in systematic medical writing. Among the most influential was Hildegard of Bingen, whose extensive works on natural healing catalogued plants according to their observable impact on the human body. Her descriptions of herbal remedies followed consistent patterns, preparation methods, conditions treated, and expected outcomes. This reflects an organized approach to empirical recording rather than unstructured tradition. Centuries later, Renaissance physician Paracelsus emphasized that natural substances possessed specific healing properties tied to physiological processes. He rejected blind adherence to ancient authority and encouraged direct observation of therapeutic effects. His work helped shape early modern pharmacology, yet he continued to affirm plant-based remedies when they demonstrated measurable benefit. Across these intellectual traditions, monastic, scholastic, and early modern, Comfrey remained recognized as a treatment that supported structural healing. Its reputation endured through multiple shifts in medical philosophy, suggesting continuity based on performance rather than belief alone. The disappearance of Comfrey reflects institutional transformation more than medical failure. The gradual decline of Comfrey in formal medicine coincided with major structural changes in how healthcare operated. Between the 17th and 19th centuries, medicine increasingly prioritized chemical isolation, standardized dosing, and centralized authority. Herbal treatments presented challenges within this emerging framework. Their potency varied with soil conditions, cultivation methods, and preparation techniques. They were difficult to standardize across large populations. As pharmaceutical chemistry advanced, isolated compounds that could be measured precisely and manufactured consistently became preferable within institutional systems. Professional licensing and regulatory frameworks further narrowed the range of accepted treatments. Knowledge that circulated outside universities, hospitals, and emerging pharmaceutical industries lost credibility regardless of its historical effectiveness. Comfrey did not undergo a decisive moment of scientific rejection. Instead, it became administratively inconvenient. Treatments that could not be easily quantified, patented, or mass-produced gradually moved to the margins of official practice. This process reflects a shift in what counted as reliable medicine. Reliability came to mean uniformity and replicability across large systems rather than long-term empirical observation in localized settings. Industrial warfare accelerated the transition toward standardized medical systems. Large armies required treatments that could be distributed widely, applied consistently, and taught rapidly to medical personnel with varying levels of training. Bone injuries in industrial warfare were often more complex due to high-velocity projectiles and explosive fragmentation. Surgical intervention, antiseptic technique, and mechanical fixation became central priorities. Medical logistics favored treatments that could be packaged, transported, and administered at scale. Under such conditions, plant-based topical preparations requiring cultivation and preparation no longer aligned with operational efficiency. Even if beneficial in certain contexts, they did not integrate easily into standardized military medical doctrine. The scale of industrial conflict therefore reinforced medical centralization. Treatments compatible with mass supply chains survived. Others faded from institutional memory. What survival history reveals is that medical systems optimize for their environments. The story of Comfrey does not demonstrate that medieval medicine was superior to modern medicine. Rather, it shows that different systems optimize for different conditions. Medieval healthcare developed under scarcity, mobility constraints, and localized treatment networks. Industrial healthcare developed under scale, regulation, and centralized production. Each system favored methods compatible with its infrastructure. When environments change, definitions of effective treatment change as well. Knowledge that once solved real survival problems may disappear not because it failed, but because it no longer fits dominant structures of authority and distribution. For those who study resilience under constrained conditions, this pattern is significant. Medical knowledge developed in low-resource environments may retain relevance where modern infrastructure is limited or disrupted. Historical treatments represent accumulated adaptation to precisely those conditions. Understanding why such knowledge disappears is therefore as important as understanding why it once thrived. Remembering abandoned knowledge reveals how history filters what we consider legitimate. Comfrey's long medical history reminds us that knowledge is not preserved solely through scientific validation. It is preserved through institutions, supply systems, and professional authority. When those structures shift, entire categories of practical experience can fade from formal recognition. For centuries, European healers, from monastery infirmaries to early universities, observed that this plant supported structural recovery after injury. Its eventual disappearance reflects changing definitions of reliability, legitimacy, and scalability, rather than a single moment of disproof. Studying these transitions helps us understand how medical knowledge evolves and what may be overlooked when systems prioritize uniformity over accumulated experience. Remembering such histories matters because they reveal how human survival has always depended on adaptation to circumstance, not just technological advancement. If you value serious historical analysis that uncovers the practical lessons hidden beneath familiar narratives, subscribe to the Survival Record and share this video with others who believe that understanding forgotten knowledge is part of understanding how humans endure.